Buenas and Hafa members and guests. Welcome to the Guam Chamber of Commerce virtual 2021 membership meeting. It was just a couple of months ago in June that we met for the first time in person since the pandemic took hold in March 2020. Our community had reached 80% immunity, and we were finally starting to enjoy some semblance of our time before COVID. With the recent double-digit growth in positive cases and the growing number of hospitalizations, our community and livelihoods are once again being threatened. Our businesses and people are divided on how to deal with the governor's latest executive order. There are various opinions that we could spend countless hours debating, but what we cannot do is turn on each other. There's still a great many businesses out there struggling to keep their doors open and their employees working. Compliance with the mandate is not an option for them. They have not recovered in the last 2 months after a year and a half of having little to no revenue. They need as much patronage as possible to keep afloat. We implore our community to not take their frustration out on employees and business establishments. Everyone is doing their best given the situation, and I can guarantee you that no staff member or business owner wants to deny entrance to their establishment nor ask for your vaccination status. We need to get through this latest issue, working together and supporting each other. Our community has proven time and time again that we are resilient, we are strong, and that we help each other in times of need. Let us continue to do so in the face of this latest challenge. As we continue to push forward, a big part of our recovery is the resumption of tourism. Although we have been encouraged by the vaccine tourism program, it's important that we continue to plan for building back this vital industry to our economy. I'm pleased that Ricky Hernandez, the Deputy Executive Manager of the Guam International Airport Authority, has agreed to share with the membership the airport's resiliency and economic recovery plan. Ricky has been an ally, an advocate, and a friend in representing our business concerns to the administration, and we thank him for this. So without further ado, I'd like to move on in our agenda. Thank you all again for joining us today. Before we get to the main speaker, I'd like to call upon Ernie Galito, our Chamber Board Member and Planning Committee Chairperson, to provide an update to the membership on our Chamber Gala. Ernie?
Afade Toda Hanzu. Welcome once again to the Guam Chamber of Commerce, our general membership meeting here on the 25th of August. And as Chairwoman Christine had mentioned earlier, we are amidst of another upsurge in pandemic infections, mostly propagated by the different variants, most notably the Delta variant. And in following health protocols that were exhibited in the governor's executive order, which was 2021-2018. Unfortunately, in compliance of that executive order, which so states that social gatherings shall be limited to no more than 100 guests. So consequently, we have made a decision that we were going to have to cancel the October 2nd gala, which was scheduled to be held at the Dusatani Grand Ballroom. I know everyone's disappointed. We are all disappointed that following safety protocols that we're going to have to curtail a lot of our business engagements as well as our social functions. It's all part of living here on Guam. Unfortunately, one of our neighbors that we're going to have to live with is going to be COVID-19. And this is some of the consequences that we have to endure if we want to continue to live with COVID-19. As we see that vaccinations have been approved by the FDA as of yesterday, the Pfizer vaccine, and we're sure that the Moderna vaccine and others will soon be approved by the FDA, which will hopefully promote more vaccinations so we can reach herd immunity and we can return to life somewhat similar to what life was before COVID-19. However, that shouldn't take away the achievements of our members and our member companies who celebrate milestone anniversaries in the class of 2021 as well as the class of 2020. So to celebrate them and also to spread the word that they did make this achievement possible, we want to just celebrate with them by this following presentation. Thank you again, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a dream. We are dreamers. Versus love. It's a world. Series of love. Ladies and gentlemen,
And we can't forget the 97th anniversary of the Guam Chamber of Commerce. All its deeds and all its institutional knowledge is passed on to our members, as well as the way forward that we're going to progress in the 2022 and the rest of 2021. So anyway, let's congratulate all of our members that you see on the screen on the presentation, and tell them, you know, things are going to get better, and we hope for them to have another anniversary in the next years to come. So anyway, thank you very much, Madam Chair. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Ernie. And I just want to extend our sincere appreciation to all Ernie does to make these galas a wonderful event, even with the recognition of our anniversary celebrants. He continues to just outdo himself from the year before. And as he mentioned, although our main gala is going to be canceled, there's going to be other activities that he's planning to still celebrate these milestones. And so thank you, Ernie, and thank you to all our member organizations that have been with us, and we look forward to celebrating individually with you all. At this time, I would like to call on our president, Catherine Castro, who will provide an update to the membership. Kat.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate all of the membership support that we have been receiving, and especially with our most recent event, our annual golf tournament. We'd like to send our members a warm Sizusmo Aussie to all of these fantastic sponsors, contributors, players, volunteers. We just had a wonderful event. Our 23rd annual amateur golf tournament was held on August 4th at Onward Telefofo Golf Club. It was an absolutely beautiful day for golf. I mean, it was raining days ahead of it, and then on that day it was just fantastic. And there was so much great energy on the golf course. We couldn't have asked for a better day. And so, you know, thank you so much. We'd also like to especially recognize our hardworking planning committee members for their support in planning this event. We'd like to say thank you so much to Frank Campillo, our chairman of the planning committee from Select Care, Jill Arnett from Deloitte & Touche, Ron Young from Security Title, Phil Santos, Matson Navigation Company, Tom Shimizu, Ambrose Inc., Frankie Perez, Charlie Onadera, Herman Ada from Capital Select Care. We truly appreciate the membership support of our chamber. And so before we introduce our featured speaker, we have a few reminders about today's event. All participants are on mute. If you have a question for our guest, please feel free to send your question via the question feature, which is generally located at the right corner of your screen. And the chamber team will pass your questions to our speaker during the Q&A portion of the program. I'm happy to introduce you to our guest today. Our speaker brings with him over a decade of government management, operational, budget, finance, and accounting experience as the former director of the Guam Legislature's Office of Finance and Budget and former deputy administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority. He also serves as the Treasurer and Investment Committee Chairperson of the Government of Guam Retirement Fund, board member for the Research Corporation of the University of Guam, and Treasurer for the Commission on Lawyer Regulation. During the evenings, our speaker teaches accounting and public budgeting at his alma mater, the University of Guam. His commitment to public service earned him the recognition of being selected to the inaugural 2020 Council of State Governments National 20 Under 40 Leadership Award, which featured 18 elected and 2 appointed government officials from around the nation. He was also awarded the Association of Government Accountants National Emerging Leader Award, provided to one person nationwide in 2020. Congratulations. He is a certified government financial manager and an accredited investment fiduciary. During the pandemic, our speaker joined other business and medical professionals on the Governor's Recovery Panel of Advisors and continues to work closely with these professionals in advising the Governor on matters relative to the COVID-19 pandemic. Members and guests, please join me in welcoming our guest presenter today, the Deputy Executive Manager of the Guam International Airport Authority, Dr. Ricky Hernandez. Welcome, Ricky.
Hey, Kathy. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And before I begin, I do want to thank Chairwoman Christine Boleto, as well as the Chamber membership for the opportunity to speak before all of you today. And I hope everyone can see the presentation. So when I first received the invitation to speak a few months ago, I had hoped we all would be able to meet in person with everyone enjoying a nice meal during this talk. But obviously, with the resurgence of COVID-19 and the Delta variant in our community, a virtual setting provides a much safer alternative. And so I acknowledge the Chamber for their consideration of its members for choosing to hold this meeting virtually, even if these types of presentations are a bit easier to sit through when lunch is being served. But as I reflected on this presentation and this discussion, when I last spoke to your membership, Guam had just entered a pandemic of condition of readiness 2, or PCOR 2, last year. Back then, I was at the Guam Economic Development Authority, and so much of my presentation attempted to explain the details of reopening, how our economy was to adjust from what many would consider a lockdown meant to curb the spread of COVID-19 to a period of recovery. At that time, I don't believe any of us could have predicted what we have faced within the past year. A second lockdown caused by a larger wave of COVID-19 cases last fall, dozens hospitalized, and too many lives lost. And while I have since moved from GITA to the Guam International Airport Authority, our work in this presentation today continues to focus on economic recovery for our island, but this time just from a different vantage point. As the engine of economic growth and development, the interests and successes of Guam's commercial airport are aligned with the interests and successes of our economy, including many of the businesses represented here today. Put differently, if the airport succeeds, I believe we all succeed. How the airport responds to the pandemic, how it builds up our resiliency and adapts to ever-changing circumstances and protocols is vital to this region's recovery. Across the world, regional, national, and international airports are operating and navigating through uncharted territory. And the nuances of the bends and curves at every inflection point over the last 18 months have presented a new path forward. History is being made each and every day by our leaders and partners in the community. And it is with the airport's history that I kind of wanted to start this discussion. So someone once said that remembering where you come from is part of where you're going. And so I think it's important to remember that the history of Guam's airport is one of growth through capital improvement and infrastructure. This photo here in front of you is a photo of the Guam airport circa 1978, when we had just one single operating gate. Only Pan Am, TWA, and Continental Air Micronesia were the airlines operating out of Guam. Not too long after this photo was taken, just 4 years later in 1982, a newer, larger facility was built to accommodate more aircraft and provide better amenities for a traveling public and what was considered a booming economy largely driven by tourists from Japan. The terminal consisted of 220,000 square feet and 10 aircraft parking positions connected with jetways to the terminal. I've been told it was dubbed a white elephant because most island leaders at the time thought it would never reach capacity, but however, within a few short years, the terminal was overcrowded and bursting at the seams with nearly 300,000 arriving passengers during those years. This spurred the planning for the facility you see today. GIA's current facility the terminal facility, was fully operational in 1998 and is a modern-day 768,000 square foot international airport with world-class amenities and state-of-the-art technology equipped to process about 5,000 passengers per hour. Throughout the airport's history, we have invested over $900 million in capital improvement projects, funded by a mixture of Federal Aviation Administration grants through the Airport Improvement Program, bond funding, as well as airport revenues and public-private partnerships. Here's just a list of the many construction projects that we've undertaken over the last several decades. But what do these improvements mean for the economy? Well, in 2002, our airport revenues were just 43.9 million. A little over, or almost 20 years later, they were at 69 million. In that same time frame, Guam's gross domestic product nearly doubled from 3.4 billion to over 6.3 billion. Total government of Guam general fund revenues more than doubled from 319 million in 2002 to 700 million in 2019. In other words, as the airport improves, so too does the economy and vice versa. In the airport's most recent economic contribution study, it was found that the total economic contribution of the Guam airport from direct, indirect, and induced measures approximated 2.3 billion, which represented 42% of GDP at that time. Employment at the airport, which includes air operations, federal government employees at TSA, Customs and Border Protection, and other local agencies, as well as our tenants, vendors, concessionaires, and including the construction activity around the airport, amounted to over 3,400 people employed just for the airport and the services we provide. The airport authority itself, the Guam International Airport Authority, makes up just 200, a little over 200 of those positions. So these economic contributions by the airport to the overall economy underscore the importance of our operations and our ability to remain resilient during these challenging times. So we know where we came from. How does that inform the airport's current response to the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, 5 months into fiscal year 2020, the airport began to feel the impact of reduced traffic. In terms of our operating revenues, we were down in fiscal year 2020 by approximately $30 million. And we continue to see a 48.6% reduction in revenues this fiscal year 2021 when comparing budget to actual. But I think these two photos better demonstrate the impact of COVID-19 on our operations. The first one on your left shows our terminal building during the Christmas holidays pre-pandemic. And obviously the photo on the right represents truly what we've been seeing daily throughout the pandemic. The airport's response to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic were really threefold. We reduced spending, we leveraged federal funding while refinancing our existing bonds, and implemented new protocols to adapt to the new operating environment. We responded to these impacts by cutting our operational and maintenance costs by over 21% as compared to what was budgeted in fiscal year 20. Moving into this fiscal year 21, we kept those spending reductions, and to date, we have reduced spending even further by an additional 19%. Of course, spending reductions could not have fully addressed the revenue losses we experienced due to the over 90% reduction in passenger traffic. And therefore, we also received $20.7 million in Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act funds. We also received $5.9 million in Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. And we just recently were allocated by the Federal Aviation Administration $15.9 million in airport rescue grants to fill the fiscal gap we continue to face, not only this fiscal year, but moving into the next. Additionally, we issued taxable refunding bonds that allowed us to not only take advantage of lower interest rates, but also to restructure our debt service and smooth it out over the next 3 fiscal years, the most important years where we need the flexibility during this period of recovery. The bonds that we refunded were taxable and closed just over a week ago and reduced interest costs from 5.96% of the bonds that were refunded to just 4.07% all-in true interest costs. These steps to stabilize the airport's operations and finances were vital to ensure the airport continues to operate 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also introduced the We Care program that aimed to ensure that we had a set of protocols and measures implemented to effectively operate an airport environment safely and securely during the pandemic. These measures included the requiring of face masks, which is currently also a federal mandate. We also installed ultraviolet lighting in all of our air handling units, continue to have controlled entry and thermal screening for all those that enter the terminal building, and enhanced sanitation and disinfection through our maintenance contracts and other facility enhancements. And of course, the promotion and encouragement of social distancing where possible. The work the airport has done to adapt to ensure our passengers feel safe was recognized by the World Travel and Tourism Council, and the airport was the first entity on Guam to receive the Safe Travel stamp on Guam back in summer of 2020. In addition, not too long ago in April of this year, the Guam airport became the first US airport in the Micronesian and Polynesian region to receive international recognition in achieving the Airports Council International Health Accreditation, which is an independent third-party review of the airport's protocols and processes in providing a safe experience for all our travelers. So these are the ways the airport has been responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we continue to work within current arrivals protocols with the Department of Public Health and Social Services to ensure that our passengers not only feel safe and secure, but that we work collaboratively toward a much more efficient process as possible for arriving and departing passengers. And so I guess the question is, what now? Where do we go from here? And these are important questions that we think about every single day at the airport. Economic recovery can be quite disjointed. We all know that the collapse last year itself was painful, and that the reopening and recovery we are traversing through today is uneven due to many things that are outside of our control. Moving forward, I believe the continuity and sustainability of airport operations, and by extension, our economy, will rely on several key factors. Right now, Guam is open for tourism. Protocols and policies currently allow passengers that arrive that are either fully vaccinated or have a negative PCR test taken 72 hours prior to arrival to be allowed to enter into Guam without quarantine. But we were able to get to this point because of the things that were within our control. Our community reduced COVID-19 cases and achieved target vaccination levels that improved the health of our community and led to a reduction in restrictions. Because of what our people were able to achieve, the Guam Visitors Bureau organized the Airbnb program that has brought in over 2,000 visitors we may not have otherwise been able to bring in if not for the reduced restrictions and updated protocols. Although we have achieved our initial vaccination target, the recent increase in positive cases and hospitalization places pressure on the need to act and impose new policies to curb the spread of COVID-19. Enacting policies locally are things that are within our control that will help make Guam a safe place for everyone living here, as well as those that wish to visit now and in the future. But there are so many things that are outside of our control that will dictate the pace of our economic recovery. The recovery of our source markets, their vaccination rates, how these two things progress and dictate a change in their air travel policies for their returning residents are what we are beholden to. And although it is frustrating not being able to control our economic future, we still must work towards solutions to build a bridge to be able to make it to the other side of this pandemic. At the airport, we continue to look for ways to diversify our revenues. Over the last 20 years, our aeronautical revenues have averaged approximately 53% of total operating revenues, with 47% coming from non-aeronautical sources. Opportunities we can find to diversify and increase our non-aeronautical revenues help us lower our costs for our airport stakeholders, but also makes us able to continue to operate in conditions such as those we are experiencing today. Currently, we are undergoing several capital improvement projects, notably the addition of a third floor international arrivals corridor that would add an additional 200,000 square feet and provide for greater business and revenue generating opportunities for our airport, our airlines, and our business partners. This would meet the Transportation Security Administration's mandate to effectively separate TSA from non-TSA screened passengers in the current shared concourse areas. This project is expected to be completed by the end of this calendar year, with a large portion being completed by the end of next month. In addition, we have the construction of our aircraft, or our R facility, our R facility, which is expected to be completed in the first quarter of fiscal year 2022. This is also a nearly $30 million project, partially funded by the FAA, and will provide a state-of-the-art modern facility to replace the former military structure our firefighters are currently operating in. But more importantly, this will provide an improved response time in the event of a crisis. In addition, we have the rehabilitation of our longest runway, runway 6 left, 24 right. The project completion is scheduled for early next calendar year. It's nearly $30 million project, and it's really reconstructing about 9,500 linear feet of concrete runway pavement that was really constructed post-World War II. Lastly, we do have security screening expansion at TSA, which became operational in February 2021. We had added 2 additional lanes with room for an additional expansion, which provides us a lot more capacity for departing passengers. Because before, you noticed in one of the first photos that it was provided that there were long lines at check-in and departure. And so this, we hope, will continue once air travel picks up over the next several months and years. This is state-of-art technology with 3D imaging of inside contents, and that will be obviously administered by the TSA. In addition, we do have projects in planning. We will be going over our and commencing our master plan update over the next 18 months, which will provide us really a path forward in terms of forecast, how we can meet the demand of that forecast in the future. And so it's going to be a very inclusive process that involves not only airport stakeholders, but also the community. And so we're looking forward to that master planning process. And I'm glad to be, the executive manager and myself are glad to be at the airport here during a master planning process, because that really provides us the ability to implement some of the visions in terms of what the forecasts will show for us and what we want to do moving forward into the future. We do have other ones listed here: cargo apron and fuel system extensions, which will help us expand the cargo operations here at the airport, in addition to airport aprons and taxiway rehabilitation, because this type of what would be considered preventive maintenance is really necessary for us to ensure continuity of operations. We have been working diligently on working on the Guam Spaceport license, which continues to be underway. We have yet to submit the application, but there are a lot of pre-application requirements that are undergoing right now, including environmental reviews. We are planning IT upgrade, not only for passenger use, but also internally for operational efficiencies, to get things more online, to ensure that we have more paperless processes. Passenger terminal improvements, these are the things that are low-hanging fruit that we wish to improve upon, including in-terminal improvements such as seats and improved services for all of our passengers. And then lastly, the replacement of terminal roofing system, just as an additional maintenance item. We continue to see our air traffic numbers improving, with more airlines beginning to resume flying. As you can see here, carriers from Korea and Taiwan have and are expected to resume flights over the next couple months. Data shows that the monthly departing seat capacity through October 2021 could be nearly 60% of pre-pandemic levels. This data and our conversations with airlines make us optimistic of the immediate future, but we must continue to work toward making Guam a safer place for people to want to visit. In addition, we have been working at the airport in terms of when this when these uptick in passengers do commence, that we are engaging and re-engaging our airport partners to be able to provide for the services that are expected by our passengers, including
We seem to be experiencing some technical difficulties. Please stand by.
being able to pick up your loved ones as they arrive back on Guam. So the airport is continuing to do what we can and be as flexible as we can in terms of working with our partners, our new partner in our airport who never has been in the airport until the pandemic, Public Health and Social Services, to be able to make the arrivals process as efficient as possible. And so in closing, every time we have achieved an airport expansion target to meet the forecasted demand, it is really this business community that has worked to meet and exceed these targets, to providing more and more services to our visitors and getting more of them through our airport and into your doors. This has and continues to push the airport to become better, to innovate, and to grow to meet these increasing demands. Enhancing the dialogue and cooperation with all of you is really key to overcoming the current crisis and ensuring that everyone survives once this storm is over. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to speak with all of you today, and I'm open to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricky. There was just a little glitch in the technology at your second to the last slide, but hopefully we can get to some of the questions here and they can make some of that clear.
Sorry, Kathy, I can't hear you.
Okay, hold on a second. Can you hear me right now? How is this? Can you hear me now? Okay.
Okay, there. Sorry about that.
There we go. Is that better? All right.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. All right. So we do have questions. So let me go ahead and get started with that. It is vitally important that a visitor's experience from the time of arrival to departure is a pleasant one. What does the airport have planned to improve processing passengers through required protocols if lines are long now and we want to build back up tourist numbers?
Sure. Thank you for the question. That's a really good question. And, when we, even before the pandemic, we've always had throughput issues, especially for arrivals. And that's through some of the existing requirements federally and locally through our Customs and Border Protection, as well as through our Customs and Quarantine Agency requirements in terms of inspection. And so for the immigration portion, even before the pandemic, we've been working with some of our airport partners to ensure that we have translation services and we have accommodations that try to push as many people through the immigration process as possible. And so Customs and Border Protection is actually instituting some additional measures to make those processes a bit quicker. And then as well, and we all know that GVB has been working closely with Customs and Quarantine Agency to digitize their process and to take that off of what is considered a manual process. And so I know the biggest sticking point here is really the new process, new for the pandemic, which is the public health process. And so we continue to work with public health and their ability to be able to process people as quickly as possible. I think that when we see lines in the baggage claim area, which is where the public health processing area is, we have made adjustments to that process in working with public health and in providing the space for them. And we want to ensure that whatever they need, the airport provides, because we are the facility that allows them to be able to do the mandates and achieve the mandates that are required of them. And so In terms of digitizing processes, it's obviously something that we hope and we push for, and we have been just continuing a dialogue with public health in terms of how to handle that. But with the difference of protocols over the last year and a half, the airport has had to be very nimble in terms of how we adjust and how we have this new agency basically operating in the airport, when flight activity arrives. So I think the question is really, I don't know if we're going to be, adjusting the quarantine protocols any further, whether reducing it further. But what I do know is that other airports in and around the world continue to require testing before coming in, and the CDC, the U.S. CDC, still requires that international passengers have to get a nucleic acid amplification test before even getting on the plane. And so these are some of the challenges that we're working through and trying to align at least some of our local quarantine exception protocols with what the US CDC has. And so those are the things that we want to make sure that the expectations are clear, that we're working with our airline partners, as well as GVB and public health, to ensure that whatever documents, as being the liaison between public health and airlines, we're doing as much as we can to ensure that whatever processes, whatever things that we see are an issue, that we try to address them as soon as we can. But I hope that answers the question.
Yes, so it kind of went into the next question, which was that many state airports they actually provide the COVID testing at the airport. And is that something that GIAA will be doing here?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think it's something that we've been talking about with public health and internally for a while, including with the state surgeon cell and the National Guard in terms of manpower. But I think that when we talk about testing, the testing is it testing for arrival or is it testing for departures, right? And so we've been continuing to see if testing for departures is something that we can do, because that requires less of a coordination with public health and more of a coordination with testing providers. And so we've thought about testing for departures, and we have had conversations in terms of private providers of testing, but until the testing is needed for departure, I think that's something that we haven't yet pulled the trigger on. If you talk about testing for arrivals, there's always the issue of throughput, and there are different, and we've seen a lot of how the airports have functioned throughout the U.S. in terms of testing for arrivals. And when the passenger counts were low, they were able to handle the throughput. But I guess with the first question seeing is we want to make sure that we get people out of the airplane and back onto the curbside to get picked up as fast as possible, including an arrivals testing protocol. Inside the airport was going to be a bit of a task. So if we think that trying to get people through Customs and Border Protection, if they're coming through international destinations or areas, and then getting them through public health, and then getting them through Customs and Quarantine Agency is somewhat of a long process. Imagine adding, and we've looked at different scenarios of testing using different types of tests, the different types of manpower, but as the traffic picks up, we don't want people to be waiting after they get off a long flight 3 or so hours before they're able to get out. And so those are some considerations, but I also will say that unless arrivals testing gets you out of some type of quarantine, then it wouldn't necessarily be something that is needed. But I think that with the protocols, for international arrivals, if we're talking strictly about tourists, the test is required to get on the plane. So having arrivals testing for international arrivals is really a bit duplicative. But I know that for domestic travel, right, that's something that we could probably target. But I hope that answers some of the questions. And we are looking into testing, and we continue to look at it, but there are impediments to it. And what are the goals for testing for departure or testing for upon arrival?
Great, thank you very much. Another question is, can Dr. Hernandez expound on recent and future military exercises?
Yeah, sure. When I was at GITA, I would really focus and kind of keep up to date with some of the military activities here. But I think maybe the question is really focused on some of the military activities that have been occurring at the airport. And so there was a Pacific Iron that had recently concluded where we coordinated with the DoD, and they were doing some obviously takeoff and landing from the international airport. We were in discussions with another activity that they were planning to do as a backup, but they did move all of those operations back to their main airport up in the north. And so I don't know if that answers the question specifically. We don't have anything else planned. We have not heard yet if there are any other activities that will occur. But for the Pacific Iron that occurred at the beginning of this month and toward the end of last month, we did coordinate with the Department of Defense in terms of ensuring that the community around the airport, especially residential communities, were at least given proper notice in terms of the noise that may have been occurring as they took off and landed. So we were cognizant of that, and we were sensitive to that, and so we worked closely with them to ensure that the surrounding community was aware of that operation.
I'm sure that was much appreciated, but I also remember seeing a whole bunch of people sending pictures on social media and just in awe of the air show, the free air show that we were having for a little bit. So another question is, what incentives will be given to airlines that can make Guam more attractive with the CDC rating as high?
Yeah, so I did bring up the CDC travel health level, which currently we're at level 3, which doesn't help, obviously, it doesn't help us currently. But like I said, there are things that are outside of our control, like source market policies for their returning residents and how that impacts their decision to travel to Guam. But I think in terms of the travel health notice and being able to market ourselves, I think that's something that we really need to work on. And obviously with the uptick in COVID positives, that does impact that travel health level quite directly. And I'm sorry, I probably didn't answer the question. Your question was about?
It was how would there be some kind of incentive, right?
Incentives.
Yeah.
No, thanks. And since May, we actually implemented a program called RAISE. It was an incentive for airlines if they were to fly fly a flight once a week at least. We would provide an up to 50% discount on their airport-related fees. And so that was extended through the end of September this fiscal year. And as we go through our own budget process, we do dialogue with the airlines a lot. And we have been talking about, once we set fees again for the next fiscal year, which is adjusted every single year based on different assumptions, then we'll re-engage in that discussion again. But our airport board of directors really had the foresight in terms of trying to provide these raise incentives and authorized the management here at the airport to be able to provide those to them. That's as much as we can provide as an airport, but I know that Guam Visitors Bureau has been discussing certain airline incentives. They're able to provide different types of, I guess, a broader type of investment incentive to airlines, whereas the airport, we can provide discounts on fees, and that's pretty much the limits of what we can provide our airlines.
Thank you. We have a question here. Thank you for your nice presentation. What would you say would be the revenue percentage of non-passenger revenue? It is comparable to another airport. Is it comparable to another airport of Guam size and capacity?
Yeah, so I guess nationally and internationally, I guess non-aeronautical revenues is probably the discussion here, and our aeronautical revenues are really just the fees that are paid by the airlines, which are charged to obviously different aspects of the passenger costs of their ticket. And so the non-aeronautical revenues are really considered our concessions, which are really tied to passenger traffic, but it's our concessions, retail, food and beverage, parking, advertisement. So those are what we consider non-aeronautical revenues. But where we see the biggest opportunity is really with the 1,800 acres of land that the airport controls. There's a lot of opportunity in terms of real estate and leasing, but we do find there to be issues as it relates to impediments that existing law prevents people from actually being interested in wanting to invest in land development here at the airport. And so we continue to work with GITA on these issues because I believe GITA also has experience with their industrial park issues with trying to find interested businesses to invest in property. So that's one of our biggest obstacles in terms of trying to diversify our revenue base. And being able to lease property is where we can continue to expand our non-aeronautical revenues. So that these are the types of revenues that really, if there is a downtime like we're experiencing now, those types of revenues will continue to keep us afloat until we get past, these kind of dark times.
Right, yeah. And I believe we have just a few more questions. Would you be able to expand on anything new in reference to Virgin Orbit?
Yeah, sure. I think, well, we continue to meet with the Federal Aviation Administration. Guam, a spaceport generally is somewhat of a difficult process to go through. But obviously with Guam's unique area on the globe, it is a place that I think Virgin Orbit and maybe other interested parties may be interested in, coming in and launching from the Guam airport as a spaceport. But the spaceport license process, pre-application process, is really what we're looking at. There are still requirements that we have to follow. Airport layout plan has to be submitted. There are environmental reviews that are being undergone. And so once these pre-application requirements are completed, we can submit the application. And I can't recall if it's a 6 months or an 8-month process for review. But that's the airport side. And so I guess the Virgin Orbit side is to get the permit to launch, do horizontal launches from the airport. So we continue to work toward that. We believe that, it's something that could create jobs, but obviously will help ensure that there are some different diverse operations here at the airport. But safety and security is really the most important thing. And so that's something that we're working through with the FAA with our pre-application process.
Certainly, the projects that you guys are working on at GIA are super exciting for Guam. And so, and the Guam Spaceport being one of the several projects that you're working on. So we are looking forward to hearing more about all of these great things that are happening. And I think that the last question that we have is, when will we be able to see direct flights to the West Coast?
Direct flights from Guam to the West Coast without flying through Hawaii. That's the question?
Yeah.
In terms of the the different routes, I think those are heavily airline driven decisions. And so currently we have one airline that does fly direct from Guam to Hawaii. We do have cargo flights that fly directly to the West Coast of the U.S. And in some cases. So it's, I don't know if it's a matter of aircraft technology. If obviously there is a possibility of flying, but it might be more of a question of economics. And so with our only U.S. flag carrier being United, flying through Hawaii to the West Coast, or to the West Coast through Hawaii, I think that might be something we hope that could be, obviously that we hope that can be something we can provide here at the airport, but really that's an airline driven, I guess it's an airline driven question. I don't want to pawn it off to airlines, but I think, if there is anything we can do here at the airport to incentivize that, then, obviously we would, but a lot of our carriers are foreign. And so there are cabotage issues with flying foreign carriers through Guam's airport. And if they have a big enough aircraft, be able to fly directly to another US port. So there are restrictions with that. And so If there is movement toward that, maybe there could be a creation of some competition, but there's because there are cabotage issues and foreign aircraft can't fly from Guam or to Guam and then to another U.S. port, then those are, obviously something that we can't control.
Yeah. And I know that I said that was the last question, but there actually is one more that popped up, and that was, has GIAA looked at PPP opportunities, and if so, what specifically?
Yeah, sure. So public-private partnerships, it might be a misnomer, but the airport has actually engaged in public-private partnerships already. PPP is a concept really that has multiple forms and meanings, and so we've in working with our concessions actually do construction of the area, such as our retail concession, and improve the area, and so they spend there's a component of a private investment into our area, and a shared risk of the benefits of that arrangement. And so we've engaged in public-private partnerships. It may not necessarily be what many people expect to be a public-private partnership, but it's really just sharing in the risks of investment and who pays what at the end of the day. And so, in the construction of some of our buildings or cargo facilities, that was what I considered a public-private partnership, where the government put in our assets of land, and a private company comes in and builds the building that we probably at that time could not have built ourselves or could not have financed ourselves. So at the time, I think what I've been told, because I wasn't there, cargo operations and expansion was needed, and the airport may not have been able to provide that type of service. So those are types of public-private partnerships that already happen at the airport. Our maintenance contracts are not done by airport employees; they're done by maintenance contracts or partnerships with other different outside companies. And so, I know that there are different levels of public-private partnership, but I'll tell you this: we are looking into what we can involve the business community inside the airport as much as we can, to the extent that we are unable to do it ourselves. But that is something we are looking forward to, and when things get better, we'll have a lot more opportunity, because I don't know if there's going to be a lot of want for private investment even in our terminal building just right now. And if we were to go out today, we may not get the best deal for ourselves. So, but we are looking at that in the future once things get a little bit better. But I will say, I know, Kathy, the issue with there being a limitation of 5 years for private companies to be able to lease land, or they have to go through what is called an exceptional term lease process, is a large impediment and has deterred several investment opportunities that could have arisen, because I guess the process is the exceptional lease term process, which is those that are beyond 5 years, is something that many businesses may not want to go through. And so if you're limited to 5 years, then obviously there's not enough time for that investment to make its money back. And so that's something that we're looking toward, and I mentioned earlier that we're working with Gita to try to address.
For sure, and I think that the legislature is well aware of this impediment, and I know that there is a movement to see what we could do about taking care of that and expanding on that. So thank you again, Ricky. We totally appreciate your presentation. I thought it was a great presentation. We had some good questions from the membership. And also on behalf of our chairwoman, thank you so much. We would like to call this meeting to adjourn. And until next month, we look forward to seeing you again. Take care, everybody. Bye now.